Admittedly, a weird angle to be filming from, but there's such beautiful light coming in from the bay window this time of day. I just really quickly wanted to first give a reading update on some really interesting books that I'm reading, but then I'm going to go to the library during this video and see what holds that I have, because there are some interesting things coming to me. Uh-oh, it's Suki freak out time. It's her play hour here. Ugh. What do we have in store? I don't know. I can just see the wildness happening. Let me grab something. This might help. This might help the craziness. Okay. First, I don't want to forget, I did finally, I think, successfully match up the unmarked paint samples that I think are the paint colors that are in this dining room, which we don't use as a dining room, behind me, that a wonderful viewer asked about. So I dug out the paint samples that were left for us. And this color called Whispering Wind, I don't know if the video is focusing on that, but it's an Olympic color, and I'll list it down below for sure. It's an Olympic paint color that you can get at Lowe's, it says on the back. And then the bottom color of the wall is this gray called Revere Pewter, and I think both are done in eggshell. And this is a Benjamin Moore. So what have I been reading? I just got out of the library this book as a new hold, which is a JM Coetzee. I've recently saw that he pronounces it Coetzee. His new book called The Pole. I was a little hesitant because I thought he's an older man now. He's writing a story about an older man having this, romance or something? And it just felt like it's something that he's done before. And am I really going to be interested in that trope, so to speak? What does he have to say? What could be interesting? I mean, it was all right. I say that to myself, and then I look back and I'm like, why do I have these pages marked? It's basically about an older man who's I think he's a maestro, and yeah, he's a maestro, and this takes place in Barcelona, where Beatrice, this wealthy woman who is on the orchestra council of the arts thing, helps to organize, and she has to host this famous maestro coming in from Poland, and he has a very long, I'm not even going to pronounce it because I don't want to just do a bad thing to a last name, but his name is so long that he's known as the Pole, as a nickname, or maestro. And he comes into town and he basically automatically falls in love with Beatrice. I mean, this is happening right away, that he leaves and then professes that he would love to spend time with her. And she's like, why do you think I would ever spend time with you? I'm married. What planet or decade are you living in? Who do you think I am? And yet she's captivated, not by him really, but just by the stage of life that she's in. I think she's in her 40s or 50s and a little bored with her marriage situation, and I think just wants to do something, it seems to me, just wants to do something non-standard in her life. But the direction that it goes in, I don't feel like it was believable. I don't. I felt like, I don't believe it. So, that's my answer to this. I do think I want to read some of his other books that were written earlier in time, and I'm trying to think of the one I'm wanted to go to. I did read Disgrace, and I thought that was just very well done. All right. The next one that I'm reading is something that I picked up at either a thrift store or like a $1 library sale, and I'm really glad I did. This is just what I needed after reading something like A Little Life. This is a book that's like 4 lectures that Ali Smith gave. Let's see, what does it say? Adapted from 4 lectures given by Ali Smith at Oxford, Artful is a tidal wave of ideas in 4 thematical bursts of thought: on time, on form, on edge, and on offer, and on reflection. Offer and reflection are together. And really, it's just a book about all types of forms of art in all its forms. Like, it's a mishmash of thoughts. You have to recognize it as 4 essays. She is haunted. The narrator is not apparently Ali Smith, but it's a narrator who's lost her husband, and she feels like he's coming back and he's actually in the room with her at times. Other than that, what I loved about it was just all of the references to different types of art, whether it's books and, fiction and poetry and movies. In one particular section that I'm reading now, which is On Edge, she's referencing Hitchcock and Charlie Chaplin, and throughout she's referencing Oliver Twist, Dickens' Oliver Twist. But in the earlier sections, she was referencing some poetry and famous poets. I have lots of pages marked. Oh my gosh, I'm looking at these leaves, little leaves falling down from this tree out front, and it's like it's showering confetti. Oh, it's so pretty. All right, what do I have marked here? We do treat books surprisingly lightly in contemporary culture. We'd never expect to understand a piece of music in one listen, but we tend to believe we've read a book after reading it just once. Books and music share more in terms of resonance than just a present tense correlation of heard note to read word. Books need time to dawn on us. It takes time to understand what makes them structurally in thematic resonance, in afterthought, and always in correspondence with the books which came before them. Oh yeah, so then there is one part where she talks about how poetry does something that prose can never do. Why? Why can't prose manage this greater verbal exactitude? Simply because we don't allocate to prose the lingual attention, the aura, the essentiality that we do to poetry. That's profound. I loved that. I am not a poetry reader of any regular kind, other than like some Mary Oliver and looky Sook, look. Trying to keep Sookie busy. Mary Oliver and really that's almost, Rilke. I've also read some Rilke. But it's something that I really want to pay attention to and start looking at. This is Graham Greene on Reading War and Peace. When I finished it, I felt, what's the use of ever writing again, since this has been done? The book was like some great tree, always in movement, always renewing itself. And because I'm reading War and Peace this year, I can certainly, that resonates so deeply with me about War and Peace. And I think you only understand it when you're reading it, or if you've read it, like you understand how it just keeps coming to life in different forms and ways during the length of the story. Yeah, Artful. Why is this book called Artful? I think it's mentioned somewhere. I feel like it's mentioned in a poem, but then also Dickens with a character in Oliver Twist calls one of his characters Artful Dodger, but he also calls him sometimes the Artful. So maybe that's where this comes from. There are plenty of people that if you're in the wrong mood, like you're just going to be like frenetic thoughts. But I was in the right mood for this. So that's why it's working for me. Starting to reread, believe it or not, The Pumpkin Eater by Penelope Mortimer. I wanted to reread this in October because this was around the time that I got this book and I read it for the first time. But I remember nothing about it, really, other than it's about a woman who's married and who has children, and she's having trouble finding her worth in her marriage dynamic because she's already done having children and she's bored out of her mind. She's gone to see a therapist and, that's not really done her any good yet anyway. So I'm just really enjoying getting back into this. I do want to read the other one that I own, which is Daddy's Gone A-Hunting. But I really wanted to get back into this because I just read a whole bunch of NYRB books at once when I got the order in. And I just don't remember this, and I wanted to appreciate it again. The last one, I just wanted to mention that I am still reading Jerusalem the Golden by Margaret Drabble and loving it. It's just like this bedside thing that I'm dipping into for a couple minutes, especially when I was reading some harder books. But not only did the cover come off, the back has come off. So I'll tape those back on at some point. But I feel like it's taken me so long to get through this book and I still have a little bit to go. I feel like this book is regenerating pages as I read them and it's actually never going to end. But I don't care. It's a slow burn. It's a typical story of the, 40s or 50s, 60s, 70s. I speak more about this, I guess, when I finish it. But when was this? Oh, it's published in 67. So maybe it's in the early 60s. But single girl, she had a strict mother. She's on her own. She's graduated from college. She's having a good time. It's a good romp, but it's a romp written by Drabble, so it's a literary romp. Let's put it that way. Then I don't have this in front of me, but I will when I check back in. I went to the Half Price bookstore the other day, which I never do, but I was close to it because I had to run and drop off some cat food to the cat rescue place that just didn't work out for Suki. And I knew I was going to be near Half Price Books, and so I took the books that I had pulled from my shelves that I wanted to get rid of, and I went over there to get a store credit. I do that maybe once a year because I usually take my books to Goodwill, but I did that. I got $9.50 credit, and as they were looking at my books, I went over to the shelf. I had a couple authors I was going to look for. They tend not to have people like Drabble and Cummins and Bruckner, but they do always have classics like Tolstoy and Dostoevsky and things like that. But one person on my list was Rachel Cusk because I wanted to get a copy of Transit, which I have on my phone, but I'm not going to read it there. And wouldn't you know, they had a copy of Transit. It's the only Rachel Cusk they had. So it was $8. I got it for free. So I have Transit. It's an interesting cover. I know we all talk about Rachel Cusk covers, but it's the other one it's not the one that I have with outline. I didn't care. It was free. I was going to get it. So I'm happy to have that, and I will be digging in. The next time I see you will be when I'm picking up books from the library, and I'll talk more about what I have on hold coming to me. See you then. Hi again. I'm not at the library yet. I thought I was going to get there during the week, and then I would just film what I was picking up. Fortunately or unfortunately, I didn't get there because this week has just been so busy. So more holds have come in that I'm really excited about that I wasn't expecting to come in right now. So that is exciting, except there's, of course, too many of them. Again, I'm on my lunch break, which means I have a time limit, which is good because I have a couple things I wanted to update that I've finished before I go to the library. So on that first clip, I talked about the Pole and Artful and the fact that I'd picked up Transit from the used bookstore for free. Then I think I referenced the fact that I was rereading The Pumpkin Eater, and it actually felt like I was reading it for the first time, like 80% of it. That's how much I didn't remember. I didn't remember the humor in this book. I mean, it's got some sad topics about the main character's marriage and how there's disagreements about how many kids they want to have, and she's not fulfilled in her life like many people, many women in the, was this done in the 60s? 62. So this is, she's certainly the main character, I think it's an unnamed narrator. She's certainly a woman of her time where her role is to be at home, even though they've got plenty of money, and she's looking after the kids, but eventually they get help, and that makes her even more bored. And the only way that she can find fulfillment and connection with her husband is through having another child. It makes her feel useful, but she's got a couple kids from the first marriage, and now this. The humor, though, in the story, she goes back in time when, I think this is all through when she's talking to the therapist, but she goes back in time and we get some scenes from her growing up, and just funny scenes are brought out of some mishaps and uncomfortable things that happen with someone who she's trying to be friends with. I mean, just... this whole scene in the middle with this girl that she's trying to be friends with named Irene is hilarious. Just, oh my God, I have so many things marked that I don't even think would come off well if I read them, if I read them separately. But then there's like real heartbreaking things, like when she marries her second or third husband and he feels like the kids are old enough to go off to boarding school, and she's never really thought of that, but they go off to boarding school. And she said, "I felt desolate without them. I burned with anger." But Dolly, anger against whom? Against what? It was all for the best. That boy and those girls set on the right path, flanneled and stockinged for Jesus and the general certificate of education, stripped for ball games in the bitter cold. It was right for Jake that they should go. Slowly, little by little, almost imperceptibly, I let them drift until only our fingertips were touching, then reaching, then finding nothing. Our hands dropped and we turned away. Oh my God. What a great way to describe how this connection with her kids, this disconnection with her kids happens when they go off to boarding school. So many funny scenes. I'm telling you, this little internal love affair with this boyfriend when she's young, and how that turns out. There is some spectacular writing in this book. I could sift through and throw up quote after quote after quote on the screen. Just do yourself a favor and read this book. If you read, is it called Mid-Century Writers when it's published in 1962? Just read this. It's not that long. It's 222 pages. Do yourself a favor. The things that you'll underline, hopefully, and really enjoy is in this book. So I have another one of her books called Daddy's Gone Hunting. And I don't want to read it right away off of the back of this, but I do plan on reading it sometime this month, which was the whole plan of why I reread this. And it's just gotten me so back into Penelope Mortimer fan club. So that's that. I did actually get to the end of Margaret Drabble's Jerusalem the Golden. There is a reference to Jerusalem the Golden somewhere in this book, but I don't remember it because I feel like I've been reading it for 6 months. But I did finally get to the end. And Margaret Drabble. I think I read at least my first Margaret Drabble this year, which was The Millstone. I might have read something before that, but I am also very much into the Margaret Drabble fan club. And on the back, since the front and the back fell off, I think this was written in, did I say it's also written in the 60s? With the smallest print you ever did see. But there's a book that's advertised by her called A Summer Birdcage. And it's about two sisters going in opposite directions. One gets married, the other doesn't get married. It sounds right up my alley that I'm going to look into. And this is one of those orange Penguin classics, and I'm going to tape this on because I think I'm going to keep this one. I don't know why. I just think I am. I don't keep everything that I read. But yeah, there's nothing specific to point out here. This is a story, a very typical story about a young free woman in the 60s with an overbearing mother, and she goes off to college, and then she gets a job afterwards, and she falls in with this friend named Clelia. And Clelia has a brother named Gabriel, who's married to Philippa. And they have some kids, and maybe something happens. Maybe Clara, the main character, wants something to happen with Gabriel, but she's just feeling her oats, sowing her oats, and just has some thoughts about the world, her world, how love actually works, how she experiences herself being like crazy in love with someone, and then maybe that doesn't always stay. Maybe she's learning that she likes that fire and pull herself back when she wants. She's also experiencing herself out in the world, being seen as attractive by other men who aren't married. So it's a really nice, somewhat coming of age, but in the hands of Margaret Drabble. It's fantastic writing. So just pick up a Drabble. I can definitely recommend this one, but The Millstone is by far just extraordinary and very forward-thinking, modern for its time. I just finished something that I had in my library bag that I didn't get to, but this was so tiny and I didn't really want to start anything new before I go to the library tomorrow. And this is a true novella at like 60 pages. And it's a story about, this was written in 2001 or published in 2001. And it's a story of, it's Annie Ernaux reflecting on, once again, because we've seen this before in a couple other books, but this one is a very short reflection on an affair or relationship, I'll say, with a guy who she's left because they've been together for 6 years. This was after her long marriage, and she's just decided, well, we're not really told why she broke up. I get the feeling like she just wasn't in the mood to be in a long-term relationship anymore. But then the guy gets a girlfriend. You know what happens when you break up with someone and then they get a girlfriend, and you're still in touch, they're still meeting with each other. It's not clear whether they're having sex or not. I don't think so. But they're friends, so they get together regularly, and she becomes possessed about this other woman. It's such a human experience. It's interesting because many people have had experiences like this. You could write it down, but in Annie Ernaux's hands, it becomes literary. It becomes something else, and that's the beauty of Annie Ernaux. I haven't read all of her books, and I haven't liked all of them, but this one really, really, in the short 60 pages, was really great. Like, it's just a wonderful reading experience. In the front, Nancy Klein in the New York Times Book Review. I don't know who Nancy Klein is. This really connected with me. Each of Ernaux's books, a brief, intense first-person narrative that flares up like a lighted match in the space between memoir and fiction. Even her obscene sentences are polished. And whatever the immediate plot, Ernaux braids into every story the story of writing it. Yep, the way that the obsession about this other woman builds, oh, this is such a treat. Then I will end before my library trip by saying I've started transit already. I said I wasn't going to start it, but I'm in a book pause before I go to the library, and I just bought this or got it for free at Half Price Books. So I've started it already, And I think it's a continuation of the woman in Outline, but it's not done in the same way that Outline is. It's like a true, this is my story. We're dropped into London, which is where she's moved to or is just moved to from that house that she had when she was married. And like just dropped right into the story of her bumping into someone that she used to have a relationship with a long time ago. Just, I mean, once again, just insane writing. The street where we were standing, so she bumps into her old boyfriend without knowing that he was in the same area. The street where we were standing was one of the broad tree-lined avenues of handsome Victorian houses that seemed to act as the guarantors of the neighborhood's respectability. Their well-pruned hedges and large polished front windows, when I passed them, had always caused me groundless feelings of both security and absolute exclusion. The flat I had shared with Gerard, the old boyfriend, had been nearby, on a street where the first faint downward cadences of tone could be heard as the neighborhood began its transition towards the rundown, traffic-choked boroughs further east. The houses, though still handsome, bore the occasional imperfection. The hedges were a little more unruly. The flat had been a big, rambling network of rooms on the upper stories of an Edwardian villa, whose striking views were expressive of the descent from the salubrious to the squalid, a dichotomy Gerard had seemed at the time either to be presiding over or imprisoned in. Who writes like that? Rachel Cusk. All right, so that's all I have. And the next time you see me, I will be in the car and I will share with you what I have from the library. Hi there. I'm at the library. I just went in and picked up my holds. It's like in the 40s out there today. And windy, so it's crazy. And there's a lot of stuff happening outside. It's a beautiful sunny day and all kinds of activities and roads closed for different fairs and stuff. So I have in these holds, since I never know what holds are going to come in at the same time, I've got a couple holds that I'm really looking forward to, and then a couple that like came in that I don't really know about, like if I'm going to get to them, but I'll share the ones that are like the iffy ones first. I saw this, I don't know, maybe it was in the New Yorker. It's called The Caretaker, and it's by an author I don't know, Ron Rash. Trying to get the glare off of that. Ron Rash, first of all, is an author of 20 books of poetry and fiction. Wow. I guess he's known for his book called Serena. He teaches at Western Carolina University. So this is a book about a guy named Jacob whose life was irrevocably altered by a childhood case of polio. And he's the sole caretaker of a cemetery. He marries someone named Naomi. This is in Blowing Rock, North Carolina in the 50s. A profound examination of friendship and rivalry, as well as a riveting story of unfolding deceit. That's all I know. I'm not going to read too much more about that, and I'm just going to try it. Could be a new author for all I know. And then I saw this, I feel like I saw this book on LitHub or something, because I don't know how I ended up with it. But it's Little Rabbit by another author I've never heard of named Alyssa Songsiradej. She's an editor at Electric Literature. She's written some fiction pieces, and she lives in Philadelphia. And this is a story of a young narrator meeting a choreographer at an artist residency in Maine. She finds him loud, conceited, and domineering. He thinks she's too serious, guarded, always running away to write. And then they run into each other after the residency, after they're both living their lives, and he invites her to a dance performance, and who knows what happens after that. Do they click? What happens? It's an interesting picture on the front. I don't know if that depicts what happens in the story. We'll see. Okay, I'm back. I had to do something with my hair. Here's another one that's like, I don't know, but I at least picked it up for now. And there's a NYRB book club that's done by somebody who's on Instagram and Twitter, and Instagram is Joie de Vivre. And I'm blanking on her name, but I'll make sure that I list her Instagram page in the notes. But she's organized this NYRB book club, and this is the book for this month, called A Fairly Good Time by Mavis Gallant. And this has another story in it too. I think it's the story that comes before it. And I think this was written in the 1970. Yeah, 1970. Shirley Perigny, the heroine of A Fairly Good Time, is an original. Derided by the Parisians she lives among and chided by her fellow Canadians, this young widow, recently remarried to Philippe, is fond of quoting Jane Austen and Kingsley Amis and of using her myopia as a defense against social aggression. I would like to try some Mavis Gallant, so we'll see. Now, the three things that I was hoping would come in pretty soon. This is The Mountain Lion by Jean Stafford. Just stunning cover by NYRB. This was written in 1947, I think. Yeah. 8-year-old Molly and her 10-year-old brother Ralph are inseparable. In league with each other against the stodgy and stupid routines of school and daily life, against their prim mother and prissy older sisters. One summer, they are sent away from genteel Los Angeles suburbs to the backcountry of Colorado, where their Uncle Claude has a ranch. And back and forth they go. And I'm assuming that's where the mountain lion comes into play. And it just sounds like a beautiful story. So who knows? And I finally got The Fawn by Magda Szabo. Yes, I do want to try a Magda Szabo, and I thought I would start by trying The Fawn. In The Door, in Izza's Ballad and in Abigail, Magda Szabo describes the complex relationships between women of different ages and backgrounds with an astute and unsparing eye. Esther, the narrator and protagonist of The Fawn, may well be Szabo's most fascinating creation. She's an only child. She grows up in provincial Hungarian town with her father, an eccentric aristocrat and steeply downward mobile flower breeder, and her mother, a harried music teacher, failing to make ends meet in the years before World War II. And finally, a Rosemary Tonks that I talked about in the New Directions publishing video that I did. I was looking at covers and saw that New Directions was putting out another Rosemary Tonks. They put out The Bloater a year or so ago. And this one is also written in the 80s. I love the cover. And I loved The Bloater. Just quirky. Quirky is what I would say. Edgy for its time. Both a sincere Bildungsroman of Sophie's attempt to seize a life for herself and a comic masterpiece with cutting observations and asides. The halt during the chase is flutteringly alive as it discusses different kinds of love, adulthood, marriage, insecurity, and stifling British snobbery and classicism. So I definitely want to try another Rosemary Tonks. I will say that in amongst all these books, almost unfortunately, I got the bee sting already. I was hoping this would be tied up in holds and I wouldn't get it for a while. Sure, I'm going to dip into this. I just want to try out the writing. I don't think I'm going to read something as large as this now, but I do want to try the writing, and then I'll return it very quickly so that other people can read it if I just want to read it later. Time will tell. Lastly, whoops, thanks for hanging in there with me. Because of a recommendation from Kate, lovely Kate from the Book Club Review podcast and her fantastic Instagram Sunday catch-ups. If you're not watching that on Instagram, I will link the podcast Instagram channel below so that you can catch Kate on her live Sunday night catch-ups. Of course, I watch it every Monday when I'm getting ready for work. I adore that Monday routine. So, I'm not much of a poetry reader. I said in an earlier video that, you know, Mary Oliver, which is a fantastic place to start, and Rilke are really the two poets that I've really enjoyed but don't really read a lot of. So she flagged up this series of books from a guy named William Siegert, and the one that she was showing was his latest one, which is like the Poetry Pharmacy. But I found this one, which is the one that my library had. They have a series of these called the Poetry Remedy, Prescriptions for the Heart, Mind, and Soul. And I looked at this online, and the way that he writes it down, which is going to be so much fun just to dig into a curated group of poetry, collection of poetry, is just mental and emotional well-being categories, motivations, self-image and self-acceptance, the world, love and loss. And he writes down he lists different poems and their authors. Modern day poets, Rilke is in here, I see, Elizabeth Jennings, Wendy Cope, Seamus Heaney, Keats, Sheena Pugh, Philip Larkin, John Donne, and on and on. So yeah, this will be a fun way for me to dip in and out. Maybe I'll just keep this and read it right before I read my daily dose of War and Peace. That would be a good way to use this book and my way of getting into some poetry. So thanks for sticking in there with me on this library haul. I really appreciate it. It's the beginning of October. I hope you're all having a wonderful start of the fall and you're reading good things. Let me know, of course, about any of these authors that I have shown you here to see if you've read any. I would really be interested if anyone's read a Ron Rash. Who knows? Let me know. Thanks for joining me, and I'll talk to you hopefully on the next one.